Hi, I'm Darren Tollender, Service Manager at Coeur d'Alene Tractor, part of the Adams Tractor Corporation. And today we're going to be talking all about fuel, specifically diesel fuel for your Kubota equipment. And we'll also be talking about fuel additives and fuel filters and touch on proper fuel storage. A lot of the questions that I typically get from customers is, what kind of fuel should I run on my tractor? Should I use the on-road diesel or the off-road diesel? And the answer to that is it really doesn't matter. Whatever convenient for you to get. I prefer the off-road diesel myself as long as it's convenient to get. Not all stations will have off-road diesel. Commercial style fuel stations will typically have red dye. Red dye diesel is no different from on-road diesel. They're both ultra-low sulfur diesel products. The only difference between red dye and green is red dye is non-taxable for road use. So you would only use it in your off-road equipment, generators, your tractor, any diesel equipment that you have that you would use off-road. A lot of people will typically fill up their tractors from a 5-gallon jerry can, which is perfectly acceptable to do, which for the most part is our preferred method. Other people will use slip tanks. The issues that we have with slip tanks is if they're not kept full going from, say, summer months to fall and winter months, if the tanks are not kept full, they'll get condensation in them. And especially tanks that have been used over a long period of time, say we've seen tanks that have been in service for 40 years, maybe sometimes more. They've never been serviced. And when those tanks are partially full, they'll get condensate in them, and that water will run down to the bottom of the tank, and you're typically filling from the bottom of the tank, so you'll get water into your fuel tank on your tractor, and that'll cause all sorts of issues. If you are gonna use a slip tank or some kind of a stationary fuel storage system, it's best to have a fuel water separator on that some sort of filtration and a fuel water separator on your actual slip tank or stationary fuel tank. So another issue we see when it comes to fuel is the change in season from summer months to the winter months. And if you have any water contamination in your fuel system with fuel that's intended for summertime use, will typically make the tractor die intermittently, because we have what we call a fuel delivery issue. What happens is you'll get water in the pleats of the filters, and with it being that cold, the water in the filter pleats will freeze, and you have a thicker fuel that is trying to get through frozen fuel filter pleats. So that's why it's important to make sure that you do have some supply of winter blended fuel, or try to get some winter blended fuel in your tractor as you're approaching those colder months. So some of the things you can do when you find yourself in a situation where your tractor seems to start and run fine, but then it slowly kind of dies. And then you go to restart it, and it'll run for a few minutes and then die again. That's typically a gelled situation. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's either gelled fuel or water in the fuel. Sometimes there's enough water in your fuel tank to where there might be a chunk of ice in the tank, and it's actually blocking the port leading out of the fuel tank to your fuel system. So there could be multiple things going on there. So what can you do in that situation? The thing you want to look for first and foremost is the tractors have a fuel water separator on them. They'll typically have either a screen or a pleated type filter in it like this, and it'll be a clear plastic bowl on the outside. And you can see clearly here, this is red dye off-road diesel, and this is water on the bottom. This is what it'll look like. If you have a significant amount of water contamination in your fuel, you will see the separation. And right then and there, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull this bowl off the tractor, dump it out, and put it back on, and make sure I'm getting clean, non-contaminated diesel fuel into the system. And you'll want to replace your fuel filter as well, because if you got this much water in there, you're going to have, if you have a tractor that has 2 filters, you're going to want to replace the filter in the actual fuel water separator. If it's a screen, you just clean it, but if it's a pleated filter like this, you'll want to change this. And also, if you have a secondary spin-on filter on a tractor, which most of the new Kubotas do, you'll want to replace both of them. So the first step is, get your fuel water separator cleaned out. Make sure you got good fresh fuel in your tank. If your tank is somewhat low at that point and you have winter blended fuel, go ahead and pour some of that in there. There are some additives you can use to get yourself out of that situation too. We carry Diesel 911 here. This is not an endorsement for this product. This is just what we use and what we like. This is basically alcohol, and it's hydroscopic. It will absorb some water. So these will sometimes get you out of a situation where you have gelled fuel. And only use what they recommend in your actual fuel system. You don't want to pour this whole thing into, our tractors. Most of our Kubota tractors under 50 horsepower have got a 10-gallon or less fuel tank on them. And this right here is to treat 60 gallons. So you don't want to pour this whole thing in there. There's a lot of guys think, hey, the more I use, the better. That's not always the case. Sometimes can get you out of a bind, but not always. It's more of a Band-Aid than anything. It's not meant to be a fix-all. So sometimes what you have to do, if it's bad enough, we'll have to completely drain your fuel system, flush the fuel system, get it in a warm shop. If there's ice in the tank, get the ice thawed out, get that other pull. We have to pull the tank. There's all kinds of different scenarios. But if the contamination is not too bad, you can get away with changing a fuel filter and putting fresh winter blended fuel in it, or sometimes you can get away with putting an additive in it. So if you are coming out of the summer months and going into winter months and you've got a significant amount of summer blended fuel in your tractor and you don't have the opportunity to burn it up before you get into the winter months, you can use this other additive product. This is to help keep fuel from anti-gelling, and it's got a cetane booster in it, a few other things to go along with it. It's a pretty good product. If you have enough room in your tank, what I recommend, pour the recommended amount in. Again, don't overdo it, and then pour some winter blended fuel over top of it to help mix the treatment into the fuel. Anytime we're pouring a product in the tank, if we have room to pour more fuel in, so I would pour the product in the tank first and then pour fuel in over the top of it, so that way it'll help mix the additive in the fuel. If you have any more questions regarding fuel additives, fuel filters, or fuel storage, you can look us up at cdatractor.com or give us a call at 208-765-2315.